the more recent decades, which you can't necessarily give a label to. There are some things, if you're going to be identifying them on a final. Okay? You know what, you can wait to give this to me after. If you're going to be identifying on the final, then what you can do is, some of them you will just give me the name of the designer and the country. There are things, not everything has a style label. And once you're coming to this particular period, meaning the last, let's say the last 30 years or so, there are people, as there were in Art Nouveau, if you remember, we talked about Gaudi, and I think I showed you Carlo Bugatti. They don't really fit the style, even though they were in that period. I wanted to show you some milestones that happened at around mid-century. Corbusier had always wanted to design apartment buildings, large complexes, modular housing, and he had, if you remember, his Pavillon de l'Esprit Nouveau was supposed to be one element of modular housing that was stacked up as apartments. He finally got to do this in the Unité d'Habitation in Marseille in 1952, as you see. And this was showing his concept of modular, well-priced housing. Brutalism was not necessarily a movement, somehow, it was a classification that got attached to a few architects, several specific buildings, which were really done like chunky building blocks, geometric shapes, irregularly put together, usually concrete and rough surfaces. Paul Rudolph, before this, Louis Kahn, the Salk Institute, is classified as brutalist. But as I said, that's not a movement. That's a few buildings categorized like this. This is another view of Salk Institute. There's a stream, a water element that goes down the center of the large open plaza. There are buildings on either side. And down the center, this is kind of disappearing into the horizon. This is in La Jolla, California. And, okay, then this one doesn't work. This is what he's done, and this is not brutalist. The Kimball Museum in Fort Worth, again, Louis Kahn, what he's done here that's interesting is developing a way, or creating a way to bring natural light into a museum. Now, this isn't showing in the gallery, but you see natural light is being filtered through, and it's coming down sideways so that it doesn't directly intrude on the paintings. This, the Art and Architecture building by Paul Rudolph, Rudolph has gone in and out of fashion, partly because some architectural critics didn't like what they call brutalist building. It's very rough, it's a very aggressive building, and it's a very exciting piece of architecture. I wanted to show you the picture of Rudolph because he's in front of one of the walls, and what you see is the rough finish of the concrete, which is also in the interior. And here is again, the walls are finished at different levels, very rough finished, you can see it here. The building's been restored recently, there's an addition to it, which is not the same kind of style, but complements it by standing back. The Whitney Museum, which, if you know, this is on 74th and Madison, it's about to open, next year it will open downtown, and the Metropolitan Museum is going to take over this building for exhibiting its modern design. It's all right, the modern painting galleries. This, again, is brutalism is really a very aggressive style. Because of that, very strong buildings, very geometric, and generally rough surface. And sometimes there will be irregular treatments of the surface, like the windows here. If you haven't been to the Whitney, it's worth going into it just because it will be something different after next year. The reason they're going downtown, one of the reasons, is because they were not permitted to destroy and build onto these landmark brownstones here. Another brutalist building, sort of Habitat 67, which was built for a World's Fair and remains and is now residential. So this is cubes stacked up in irregular fashion. Richard Meier, this is not brutalism again. I thought you should know about Richard Meier, who is still famous. He's been working for over 50 years. He was a follower and a great admirer of Le Corbusier. And you can see Corbusier's influence here in the white, in the strips of windows, although he doesn't treat it the same way. Most of Meier's buildings are white. His other most famous one is the High Museum in Atlanta, and something called the Athenaeum in Indiana. He has also designed down on Charles Street the first two residential glass skyscrapers in New York, Charles Street and the West Side Highway. They're buildings framed in glass, steel and glass. They're very beautiful buildings. They're buildings that have had a privacy. Remember I told you about the Farnsworth house that Ian Farnsworth didn't want to live in because she felt too open to the public. When you go into these buildings, on one side, in the living room, you look out on the Hudson River, the towers. They're about, I think it's about 30-odd feet. I mean, they're not skyscrapers, but they're tall rectangular towers. And all the sides are glass. So in your bedroom, you can be getting undressed, looking across the street, or with the person across the street looking at you. So obviously, I mean, it's bedrooms which have to be curtained off, have created enormous challenges for the interior designers doing them, because you want to compromise between the privacy and the openness. Louis, these are some just names you should remember. Louis Barragan, a Brazilian architect, who did, this was a ranch and horse stables. Beautiful color in his very geometric, generally low buildings. I just wanted to show you one. He was also a winner of the Pritzker Prize in Architecture. I'm sorry. I.M. Pei, who has done a lot of other things, but particularly I wanted you to see the National Gallery. And again, I'm showing you a few highlights of this particular time, late mid-century and a little later. National Gallery in Washington. The East Wing looks very different from anything that was relating to the Smithsonian or relating to any of the other buildings. This is on just off the mall. This is a marble, a very smooth marble-faced exterior. This is at irregular shapes and kind of jagged in the interior. I don't think this is a building that you classify in any particular way, except late modernism, which is not really any particular style. I wanted to show you the last thing. Paul Rudolph did his own apartment on Beekman Place, which is about 50th Street on the East River. This was his triplex on top of a townhouse. And this is a building that's difficult, or a residence is difficult to understand. It's 3 levels. There's like an open atrium in the middle that looks down to the levels below. The surfaces are all white and polished, white and glass and plexiglass and steel. It's a very non-private space and very much a party space. He lived here on the upper floor. He had this bathtub that had a glass bottom, so that people who owned it about 10 years ago, when I was fortunate enough to be able to get in to see it, they were a couple with young adolescent children. And the woman said, I can't take a bath because, the kids are running around the house and the bathtub is glass bottom. They didn't live there for long. But it's a very dramatic house which he used to experiment with his use of different levels of space and different materials. Actually, this one suggests what it was like. I mean, you see, you walk along, there are, this is cushioned here, these are the stainless steel rods, these are plexiglass, the, what is it, the upright part of the railings. And the railing, you feel protected, except the stairway is glass. So it's kind of disorienting going up in the stairway. But again, he was manipulating geometric forms. And the last image was, this was an ideal party place, and he ran apparently, had a lot of parties there. But I want you to have heard of Rudolph, even though we'll probably never be able to get it to see the house again. It's probably been drastically changed. Okay, now we are going to Scandinavian and Italian design. One of the difficulties of